1. Introduction. A vanishing in the night. Disappearance cases often follow predictable patterns clues. Surface, suspects emerge, and sooner or later, truth reveals itself. But some vanishings defy this order, resisting explanation despite extensive investigation. One such case is that of Brandon Swanson, a 19-year-old from Marshall, Minnesota, who disappeared without a trace on May 14, 2008, after driving into a ditch and calling his parents for help. Despite a nearly hour-long phone call with his father, advanced search efforts, and years of public attention, Brandon has never been found. His disappearance is as baffling today as it was the morning after he vanished. The case inspired Brandon's Law, reshaped how police handle missing adults, and continues to haunt both investigators and the public. 2. Who was Brandon Swanson? Brandon Swanson was born on the 30th of January, 1989 in Marshall, Minnesota. Friends and family describe him as an intelligent, friendly, and responsible young man with a quick wit and a deep curiosity about the world. He was particularly interested in science, law enforcement, and emergency response. And he had aspirations of becoming involved in criminal justice someday. He wore glasses, stood around 5'6", and weighed about 120 pounds. He wasn't a troublemaker or party animal. In fact, those close to him often said he was the type to play it safe. In 2008, Brandon was a student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, attending its Canby campus, about 30 miles from his hometown of Marshall. He had just completed his spring semester and was celebrating with friends on the night he disappeared. His behavior that day didn't raise any red flags. He was in good spirits, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary. Brandon was close with his family, particularly his parents, Annette and Brian Swanson. They trusted him, and he trusted them. So when he called them shortly after midnight on May 14, asking for help, they didn't hesitate to get in the car and go looking. Little did they know it would be the last time anyone heard from their son. 3. The night of May 13, 14, 2008. On the evening of May 13, 2008, Brandon joined friends in Canby for a small get-together to celebrate the end of the semester. Accounts vary slightly, but most suggest the gathering was low-key. Brandon had consumed some alcohol, but according to witnesses, he was not intoxicated or impaired when he left. He reportedly left the party sometime between 10:30 p.m. and 11:30 p.m., intending to drive back to his family's home in Marshall. Brandon was driving his Chevy Lumina, a relatively old but reliable vehicle. The route from Canby to Marshall is about 30 miles southeast, with long stretches of rural highways, gravel roads, and farmland in between. There were no streetlights, and very few landmarks in the region. Getting lost was entirely possible, especially in the dark. Sometime after midnight, Brandon's car veered off the road and ended up in a ditch. The vehicle was not damaged, and Brandon was unhurt. He attempted to free the car but couldn't. Instead of walking toward visible lights in the distance, he decided to call his parents for help. At 12:30 a.m., Brandon called his father, Brian, and explained what had happened. He said he thought he was near the small town of Lind, which was close to Marshall. Believing they could locate him quickly, his parents drove out in that direction and remained on the phone with Brandon while he described what he saw around him. But no matter how many directions they took, they couldn't find him. And it quickly became clear that something wasn't right. 4. The 47-minute phone call. Brandon and his parents were on the phone for 47 minutes, an agonizingly long time in retrospect. During the call, Brandon sounded frustrated but coherent, giving directions, describing lights he could see in the distance, and trying to match their locations. He said he would walk toward what he thought were city lights, possibly Marshall or Lind, while they continued to drive and look for him. Brandon never sounded panicked. He never mentioned feeling threatened or seeing anyone else. His tone was focused. He was determined to make his way toward a recognizable area. He told his father to meet him at a parking lot or location up ahead. All the while, his parents continued circling the area near Lind, growing increasingly confused. Then, at around 1:54 a.m., Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, shit," and the call abruptly went silent. His parents tried calling him back repeatedly, but the phone rang several times before going to voicemail. They waited a few hours, hoping he had found shelter or had run out of battery. When the sun rose and Brandon still hadn't come home, his parents contacted the police. 5. Initial police response. When Annette and Brian Swanson reported their son missing on the morning of May 14, 2008, they were met with a frustrating but familiar response. Wait it out. Law enforcement explained that it was not uncommon for young adults, especially 19-year-old Molesto, vanish for a night without telling anyone. Brandon, after all, was legally an adult, and there was no immediate evidence of danger. The idea that Brandon might have been simply blowing off steam or sleeping it off somewhere was a painful notion for his parents, who knew their son well enough to realize this was out of character. He had called them for help, stayed on the phone for nearly an hour, and sounded genuinely lost, not drunk or evasive. Despite their pleas, the early hours of the investigation were sluggish. Police didn't begin taking the case seriously until later that afternoon, after persistent urging from the Swansons. When they finally checked Brandon's cell phone records, a startling discovery was made. He hadn't been near Lind at all. His last known cell phone signal pinged a tower near Taunton, a small town roughly 25 miles northwest of where he claimed to be. This was in the opposite direction of Marshall and nowhere near the roads he should have been on. This critical piece of data shifted the investigation into high gear. 6. Cell tower revelation and search expansion. With this new information in hand, search teams turned their attention to the Taunton-Porter corridor, specifically near the Yellow Medicine River area, defined by rural roads, small bridges, and large open fields. It was determined that Brandon's call had remained connected to the Porter cell tower throughout his 47-minute conversation with his parents. Soon after, authorities discovered Brandon's Chevy Lumine, exactly where the cell data suggested it would be, on the edge of a gravel road ditch in Lincoln County, near the Yellow Medicine River. The vehicle was in good condition. The keys were not inside, and there were no signs of struggle, blood, or foul play. This led to a new, disturbing realization. Brandon had been completely unaware of where he actually was. Despite sounding confident during his call, he had apparently misjudged his location by nearly 30 miles. So why was he there? Had he taken a wrong turn, gotten disoriented in the dark, or had someone else led him off course? There were no immediate answers. 7. Discovery of the car. Brandon's car was found on a gravel road along County Road 16, nestled between the towns of Taunton and Porter. The area was extremely rural, with no streetlights, no nearby homes, and surrounded by farmland. The car was slightly off the road in a ditch, but it was not stuck or disabled in any way. This raised another strange question. Why didn't Brandon just stay with the car? He had called his parents and told them he was walking toward visible lights. But there were no major towns or visible lights from that spot, at least not any that could be easily mistaken for Lind or Marshall. Authorities concluded that Brandon had left the car voluntarily and walked off into the night, possibly trying to reach help or a more visible area. But in doing so, he walked into danger, confusion, or possibly fatal terrain. The fact that he had no flashlight, the terrain was difficult, and he was likely disoriented made matters worse. From that point forward, the search intensified. 8. The terrain and search challenges The location where Brandon's car was found between Taunton and Porter in rural Minnesota was anything but hospitable. The area consisted of uneven gravel roads, ditch-lined fields, and a mix of pastureland, sloughs, creeks, and deep brush. It was also early spring, meaning the ground was still wet and muddy from the thaw, and visibility was low due to overgrown grasses and trees just beginning to bud. The nearby Yellow Medicine River, which runs about a mile south of where the car was located, became a major focus of search efforts. It was the most prominent geographical feature, and authorities theorized that Brandon, disoriented in the dark, might have tried to cross it and accidentally drowned. But that theory had problems. First, the river wasn't particularly wide or deep in most places. It had several shallow sections, and while dangerous in parts, it wasn't likely to conceal a body indefinitely, especially with the kinds of search efforts that followed. Over the coming weeks and months, the area was searched exhaustively. Ground teams, search and rescue dogs, ATVs, drones, and aircraft combed the region. Divers searched the river. Volunteers poured in from across Minnesota, and yet nothing was found. No body, no clothing, no phone, no trace of Brandon, just the abandoned car and a bewildering trail that vanished into silence. This lack of evidence intensified the mystery and gave rise to two competing theories. Brandon fell into the river or another body of water and drowned, possibly swept downstream or lodged in debris where searchers couldn't find him. Foul play, he encountered someone after leaving his car, and something happened. 9. Cadaver dogs and river theories. With no visible sign of Brandon Swanson above ground, the Yellow Medicine River quickly became the central focus of investigators. Many believe Brandon had fallen or waded into the water in the early hours of May 14, 2008, perhaps misjudging its depth or strength in the dark and drowned. To test that theory, the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, along with other agencies and volunteer organizations, initiated multiple searches using cadaver dogs, also known as human remains detection, HRD, canines. These dogs are trained to detect the scent of decomposing human tissue even from significant distances and even underwater. What happened next was both intriguing and frustrating. In July 2008, two separate cadaver dogs independently alerted at the same location along the Yellow Medicine River, approximately a mile from where Brandon's car was found. This indicated a strong possibility that human remains had at some point been in the area. It provided hope, however faint, that Brandon's remains might be recovered. But again, nothing physical was found. Divers searched that section of the river thoroughly. Silt, fallen trees, and shifting currents made it challenging, but investigators were confident in their efforts. Still, no remains surfaced. Not a shred of clothing, not a shoe, not even a wallet. Further canine searches, months and even years later, sometimes showed similar alerts, but never confirmed anything conclusively. While scent detection suggested that a human body had been in or near the water, search teams could never verify it. This led to growing skepticism around the river theory. Could a body really vanish so completely in a relatively shallow, slow-moving river? And if the dogs were right, why hadn't anything turned up in over a decade? Eventually, investigators began to expand their scope of inquiry, not only focusing on nature, but also considering human involvement. 10. Foul play possibilities. While Brandon Swanson's disappearance initially appeared to be a tragic accidental young man wandering into a river or dying of exposure, many aspects of the case don't fit that narrative neatly. As time passed and searchers turned up no physical evidence whatsoever, authorities, amateur sleuths, and even Brandon's family began to consider a more troubling possibility: foul play. No signs of a struggle, but still suspicious. It's true there was no blood, no torn clothing, no disturbed vegetation, and no witness reports of any altercation near Brandon's abandoned vehicle. But that doesn't entirely rule out foul play. The call between Brandon and his father ended with the words, "Oh shit." Then complete silence. This sudden outburst suggested an abrupt, unexpected event. Some possibilities considered, he fell perhaps into a ditch or ravine. He saw something like an animal or another person. He was confronted by someone in a vehicle or on foot. Investigators could never determine exactly what happened in that moment. But the phone call, which remained connected for several more minutes, picked up only silencino struggle. No footsteps, no wind, no splash. Just silence. Could someone have been following him? One theory posits that someone encountered Brandon after he left his car, possibly a passing motorist, a local resident, or someone intentionally patrolling the area. Though this region is sparsely populated, people do live in scattered farmhouses, and it's not unheard of for residents to react aggressively to strangers on private property at night. There are darker variations of this theory. Brandon may have witnessed something he wasn't meant to see, such as an illegal activity, and was silenced. He may have accepted a ride from someone he thought was helping only for it to go wrong. Someone harmed him and later disposed of the body well outside the original search area. Yet, the lack of any witnesses, physical evidence, or unusual activity reports from residents that night make these theories difficult to prove. Is it possible his body was moved? Some believe Brandon's body was initially hidden or buried, then later moved to another location. This could explain why cadaver dogs may have picked up a scent that then vanished in follow-up searches. However, this theory assumes a high level of knowledge of the land, timing, and careful concealment, which would likely point to a local individual, someone with intimate familiarity with the terrain and a reason to fear being caught. Still, there's no known motive, no suspect, and no corroborating reports of suspicious individuals in the area at that time. With foul play still unproven but not ruled out, Brandon's family took matters into their own hands to prevent future cases from being treated with the same initial delay. 11. Brandon's law and legislative impact. In the days and weeks after Brandon's disappearance, his parents, Annette and Brian Swanson, not only grappled with the terrifying unknown of their son's fate, they also faced another source of anguish: how law enforcement initially responded. Despite Brandon being a legal adult, he was clearly in need of help. He called his parents, sounded distressed but rational, and disappeared mid-call under unusual circumstances. Yet police treated the case as if he were just another teenager out partying or blowing off steam. They didn't begin an active search until many hours later, precious time that may have made a difference. The Swansons believed this attitude was not only unacceptable, but also dangerously common, so they lobbied the Minnesota State Legislature to address the issue. Their efforts paid off. What is Brandon's Law? In 2009, Minnesota passed Brandon's Law, a groundbreaking piece of legislation designed to prevent future delays in missing person investigations, especially those involving adults who don't meet the typical at-risk categories: children, elderly, or known mental health cases. Key provisions of the law include: law enforcement agencies must take reports of missing adults immediately, regardless of the person's age or perceived lifestyle. Agencies are required to promptly initiate an investigation if the missing person is believed to be in danger, even in the absence of foul play. There is no mandatory waiting period to report an adult missing. Investigations must include coordination between agencies, when applicable, to ensure quick and widespread response. This law ensures that individuals like Brandon, who disappear under mysterious and potentially dangerous circumstances, will be taken seriously from the outset. Real-world impact. Brandon's Law became a model for other states. It brought national attention to how missing adult cases are often mishandled or delayed due to outdated assumptions. Law enforcement across Minnesota received updated training, and missing person protocols were revised in several jurisdictions. For Brandon's parents, passing the law was both a tribute to their son's memory and a mission to protect others. But despite this victory, the ultimate question still loomed unanswered. Where was Brandon? 12. The search efforts over the years. In many missing persons cases, public and official attention fades within days or weeks. But Brandon Swanson's disappearance sparked an enduring campaign of yearly, relentless searches, driven by his family, local volunteers, and dedicated investigators. These efforts continued long after headlines faded, keeping the mystery alive and the hope of answers burning. Year 1, 2008, 2009. The initial search in 2008 focused heavily on the area around Brandon's abandoned car near Taunton and the Yellow Medicine River. After the canine alerts in July 2008, searchers doubled their efforts around that portion of the river and surrounding farmland. Resources used included helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft for aerial sweeps, boats and divers in the river, foot patrols, and ATVs, cadaver dogs, and tracking dogs. Grids mapped over hundreds of acres of land. Despite this massive mobilization, not a single physical trace of Brandon was found. Cadaver dogs continue the work. In the following years, HRD dogs were brought back again and again. Some alerts continued along the same stretch of river, which deepened suspicions that a body had once been there, but nothing remained. These alerts gradually grew weaker over time, and no solid confirmation was ever obtained. Investigators began questioning the reliability of the terrain, muddy, shifting, and full of debris and deadfall. It was possible that a body had briefly surfaced and later been covered again. Some even speculated that the dogs were picking up residual scent from a different case, though no other known disappearance had occurred in that area. Landowners and community join in. Local landowners opened their farms and properties to search teams, and the small towns of Taunton, Porter, Lind, and Canby came together in powerful ways. People donated food, supplies, land access, and time, even years later. Every spring, as fields thawed and brush cleared, new search efforts would begin. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA, assisted in mapping potential walking paths Brandon could have taken based on terrain and known landmarks. Private theories and volunteer investigations. Over the years, online communities, amateur sleuths, and missing 411 enthusiasts who follow mysterious disappearances in wilderness areas proposed their own theories and maps. Some proposed alternate walking paths that could have led Brandon into underground culverts, old wells, or even abandoned barns. Others examined local crime reports from the time, looking for overlapping activity. A few theorized that wild animals could have scattered remains, though there was no trace of clothing or personal items. But no search, no matter how high-tech, organized, or heartfelt, produced any results. The mystery persisted. 13. Unconfirmed leads and false alarms. As with many long-running missing persons investigations, the Brandon Swanson case has attracted its share of false leads, dead ends, and misinformation. While some tips seemed promising at first, none ultimately led to a resolution. Still, each had to be taken seriously, and many required extensive follow-up by law enforcement or volunteers. The Cottonwood Pass rumor. One of the more persistent rumors involved a supposed sighting or event near Cottonwood Pass, a location considerably west of the main search area. Some versions of this story claimed a body had been buried or moved there, while others referenced suspicious individuals seen in the area around the time Brandon went missing. Authorities investigated these claims and conducted searches and interviews, but found no evidence to substantiate the rumors. There were no remains, no verified sightings, and no credible leads, that connected the area to Brandon: Airport Mesa and the 2013 discovery claim. In later years, particularly in online forums, a story circulated that on the 27th of December, 2013, human remains were discovered near the Airport Mesa trailhead, a place reportedly favored by Brandon. According to the claim, the remains were not Brandon's, but those of an older man possibly murdered and left in shallow water to slow decomposition. This story was often presented as fact, but has no official verification. There is no public record, law enforcement, press release, or media report confirming a discovery of this nature in the Brandon Swanson case. It is possible this was a fabricated account, or it may have been confused with another case entirely. Regardless, it did not affect the direction of Brandon's investigation. Brandon's family and the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office received dozens of anonymous tips over the years. Some callers claimed to have overheard confessions or seen strange behavior from someone in the area around the time of Brandon's disappearance. Others alleged that certain individuals in the community knew more than they admitted. Every credible tip was followed up. In most cases, the person accused had an alibi or no connection to Brandon. The tip was based on hearsay, speculation, or mistaken identity. The information led nowhere, and no charges or warrants resulted. This constant cycle of hope and disappointment wore heavily on Brandon's parents, who felt as if they were chasing ghosts year after year. Psychics and media attention. Like many unsolved cases, Brandon's disappearance attracted attention from psychics, some of whom reached out to his parents directly. The family, while desperate for answers, remained skeptical and declined to participate in most of these sessions. Investigators noted that none of the psychic tips provided anything useful or verifiable. Television shows and podcasts occasionally feature the case, but the media coverage remained limited. Still, each time Brandon's story was re-aired or shared on social media, it prompted a new wave of tips, many of which had to be carefully sorted and checked. 14. Unanswered questions and theories that persist. As of today, more than 15 years have passed since Brandon Swanson vanished without a trace. His case remains open, unsolved, and deeply perplexing, not just for his family and investigators, but for thousands of people who have studied the facts, scoured the maps, and retraced his final known moments. Despite exhaustive searches and widespread attention, no conclusive evidence has ever surfaced. This enduring mystery leaves behind a haunting set of unanswered questions, each one feeding into several competing theories about what really happened that night. Did Brandon actually know where he was? Brandon told his parents that he believed he was near Lind, which led them to search in entirely the wrong direction. However, cell phone tower data later showed he was actually much farther northwest, near Porter, and eventually his car was found close to Taunton. Why the discrepancy? Was he mistaken due to darkness and disorientation? Or did something change after he placed that call? Perhaps he had been near Lind and continued driving afterward, unknowingly traveling west. Or maybe he had gotten a ride from someone, or wandered much farther than he realized. Did his disorientation suggest a head injury, dehydration, or substance influence? No one can say for sure. What happened at the moment he said, "Oh shit"? This line spoken at the end of the 47-minute call with his father remains one of the most chilling aspects of the case. After that, Brandon's phone remained connected but completely silent, picking up no background noise. Possible interpretations include he fell into water, a ravine, or down a steep ditch. He was startled by something animal, a sudden drop, or a person. He saw a threat, perhaps headlights, another person, or something alarming. He was confronted or attacked in some way, and his phone fell into tall grass or water. But if he fell or was attacked, why was there no physical trace, no blood, no clothing, no body? Was there a cover-up? Some theorists believe Brandon encountered a person or group that caused his death intentionally or accidentally, and that his body was subsequently moved or hidden. This could explain the complete absence of remains despite thorough searches. This theory hinges on the following. The area is remote, meaning locals would know how to hide a body effectively. There is a long enough delay between disappearance and full-scale search that someone could have intervened. His phone stayed active for a while after he went silent, meaning his phone, and perhaps Brandon, was not immediately destroyed. Still, no one has ever been named as a person of interest, and no evidence of foul play has been found. Did Brandon drown? Many investigators return to the river as the most plausible explanation. Dogs indicated a scent near it, and Brandon's behavior on the call navigating fences and tall grass suggests he may have been trying to follow the water to safety. But challenges to this theory persist. The Yellow Medicine River is shallow, and searchers combed it extensively. No belonging shoes, phone, wallet, or closure found downstream. Even if decomposition occurred, there should have been at least some physical trace. After all these years, the drowning theory lacks final proof, despite being the most logistically likely. Did Brandon want to disappear? This theory suggests Brandon staged his disappearance possibly as a form of escape or protest. Arguments against this include he seemed emotionally stable, close to his family, and had made long-term plans. He was actively seeking help from his parents on the phone. There's no indication he was trying to vanish. No activity on his social security number, bank accounts, or any ID trail has ever occurred. For all intents and purposes, Brandon Swanson vanished into thin air with no sign of foul play, no evidence of accident, and no digital trace of continued life. 15. The legacy of the case and public fascination. The disappearance of Brandon Swanson has become more than just a local mystery. Over the years, it has entered the broader landscape of unexplained disappearances in America, often compared to other cold cases that defy logic, resolution, or closure. It's a case that continues to raise eyebrows not because it's the most dramatic, but because it is so ordinary and yet so completely baffling. A case without a body. One of the most unsettling aspects of Brandon's case is that no remains have ever been recovered, not even a shoe, piece of clothing, or phone. In a world where digital footprints are nearly impossible to erase, Brandon simply stopped existing after a single phone call. That void has become the centerpiece of the mystery. Compare that to similar cases where remains are found within weeks, just beyond the initial search grid. Disappearances turn out to be runaways or foul play resolved with arrests. Accidents are eventually uncovered through forensic evidence. Brandon's case is none of these. It is uniquely empty, making it fertile ground for ongoing speculation. Brandon's law and cultural shift. As discussed in part 11, Brandon's case directly led to legislative change in Minnesota, but its legacy extends further. In the true crime community, it's cited as a template for what responsible advocacy can do. The Swanson family turned grief into reform. Podcasts, documentaries, and books often reference Brandon's law as a turning point in missing adult policy, a wake-up call for law enforcement to take young adults' disappearances seriously, an example of how persistence from a grieving family can lead to real change. It also prompted policy reviews in other states where procedures were still outdated or dismissive regarding wandering adults. The online community and true crime enthusiasts, online forums like Reddit, Web Sleuths, and Missing 411 communities have taken a deep interest in Brandon's story. Detailed maps, search paths, and signal triangulation charts have been made by civilians dedicated to cracking the case. Some users even conducted field searches or traveled to the area to document geography and terrain. Others used satellite imagery and historical weather data to simulate what Brandon might have experienced that night. The case is frequently cited in podcasts like The Vanished, crime junkie, and trace evidence. YouTube documentaries that recreate Brandon's final phone call. Books and blogs focused on unexplained rural vanishings. For many, Brandon's disappearance represents a perfect storm of ambiguity. No obvious suspect, no accident site, no clear motive, and yet an overwhelming sense that something very wrong happened. A family's strength. Despite the years of pain and unanswered questions, the Swansons remain active. They've participated in missing persons conferences, spoken publicly, and counseled other families facing similar nightmares. They continue to hold out hope, not necessarily for Brandon's return, but for closure, a bone fragment, a phone, a clue, anything. Their message to the world remains clear. Brandon didn't just disappear. Somebody knows something, and we won't stop looking. 16. Final theories and conclusion. After thousands of hours of searching, hundreds of interviews, and over 15 years of silence, Brandon Swanson remains missing. His disappearance, despite happening in a relatively small, open, and familiar region, has become one of the most puzzling, unsolved cases in modern American history. As the investigation endures, a few core theories continue to dominate discussions. Theory 1. Brandon accidentally drowned. This remains the officially favored explanation by many search and rescue professionals. Canine scent trails, the "oh shit" exclamation, and his descriptions of brush, fences, and water suggest Brandon was walking near the Yellow Medicine River. The theory posits he may have fallen into the river, hit his head, or become trapped in water, or thick vegetation, and died shortly afterward. Problems with the theory. The river is relatively shallow in that area. No clothing, phone, wallet, or bones were ever recovered. Search efforts, including aerial scans, divers, sonar, and cadaver dogs, found nothing conclusive even years later. Theory 2. Foul play or encounter with another person. This theory suggests Brandon encountered someone after ending the call, someone who may have harmed him. Possibilities include a passerby or local resident who picked him up or confronted him, an accidental hit and run, followed by concealment, a deliberate act, perhaps by someone under the influence, attempting to avoid consequences. Supporting ideas. The total lack of physical evidence is typical of a controlled cleanup, not a natural accident. The phone going completely silent and undisturbed may suggest interruption or confiscation. Counterpoint. There's no known motive, no persons of interest, and no physical evidence suggesting foul play. Theory 3. Misadventure and exposure. Some believe Brandon may have become disoriented and succumbed to exposure. Temperatures dropped into the low 40s degrees Fahrenheit that night. If Brandon had fallen, injured himself, or become hypothermic, he may have wandered off course or collapsed in dense brush or tall grass. Despite the simplicity of this theory, it is undermined by the fact that extensive ground and aerial searches covered likely routes. No trace of Brandon was found of him years later, when fields were tilled or thawed. Theory 4. Voluntary disappearance, highly unlikely. While almost universally rejected, some have floated the idea that Brandon staged his disappearance. However, he had no known history of mental illness, substance dependency, or distress. He was on the phone with his parents for 47 minutes, actively seeking rescue. There's been no trace of him ever since, no bank use, Idaho use, or credible sightings. Forensic investigators and the Swanson family strongly believe Brandon did not choose to disappear. Closing reflection. Why this case endures. The Brandon Swanson case sits at the intersection of tragedy and enigma. It lacks the typical elements of a disappearance. No messy relationships, no confirmed trauma or conflict. No physical evidence at the scene, no digital trail, no closure. Instead, it offers something much rarer. A person vanishing in real time while speaking calmly to a loved one. In that, it becomes deeply unsettling. We can follow his steps through voice, emotion, and geography, yet never reach the final page. The search for Brandon Swanson is more than a recovery mission. It's a symbol of a family's refusal to forget, of a community's ongoing hope, and of the limitations of modern search and rescue when nature, time, and chance align. To this day, Brandon's story inspires volunteerism, advocacy, and renewed efforts to improve the way missing persons cases are treated. His voice, captured in that final call, remains a haunting reminder that even in the age of satellites and smartphones, some mysteries can still go unsolved. And for as long as the land is searched and questions are asked, Brandon Swanson will not be forgotten.